welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. I didn't anticipate going live today because it's been a little bit of a crampy day, if you know what I mean. But it's late, we're feeling a little bit better now. We have the book, the one, the only holy grail of spiciness. So we are going to continue our reading of The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis today. We're going to break it down. If you're unfamiliar with this book, we started reading it in the first episode, which is called God is a Witch. And in today's episode, it is called God is a Mother, because we are continuing chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6, if we can get to it. And it essentially says that the origins of God is the mother, perhaps? We don't know. We will find out in today's episode, but grab a snack, grab a drink, grab, a friend or a family member if you have somebody. If you want to have a bit of a spicy conversation with somebody, be like, bro, what do you think of this book? It's crazy, all right? The Vintage System. Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather, my friend. And today we are going to be deep diving into this book. It is one of my favorite books, okay? But it is, again, a book, okay? So everything we are reading today is from this book. It might be a little bit dated because the book is from 1971. There's been a lot of scientific discoveries since 1971. There's also a little bit of a racist tone to this book, okay? This book is a little offensive, okay? That I have to preface this video with that because in the previous episode of me reading this book, it kind of caused some stuff to happen, and it was wild. So what we're gonna do today is just give you the disclaimer, okay? And I will continue to give the disclaimer throughout the live, but here we go. Here we go. Isinator, hey, hi, hello, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. Jupiter Haven, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather and Nightmare Fuel Studios. I'm so happy to have you here tonight. Welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. It's the book again. The book. So it's gonna be interesting, okay? I have to let everybody know that there just might be some stuff in here that we all don't really know. So we're here to talk about it and dissect it together because that's more fun, right? Light Bulb Subliminals, what a fun name! Hey, hi, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. I hope you enjoy this video. It's good to see you posting consistently again. Yay! I'm so happy you are here with us today. But anyway, we got through a decent amount of the book last time, but this time we're gonna try and get through the rest, maybe not the rest of part one, but we're gonna try and get through a few chapters. So, are you ready? Some of what's written in here is so explicit, I might not be able to share it in the video. Please know that. And we'll be breaking it down bit by bit together, so we're not confused, because I am mostly confused for this. So, welcome to your story time, your bedtime story. Get in bed, get tucked in, get the mood lighting. Okay, that's why we got the blue lighting today. So it can be a cute little bedtime story, all right? Very unconventional bedtime story, but let's have fun today. All right, chapter 3, part 1, The Golden Age and the Blessed Lady. The tradition of the Golden Age arose from the natural regrets expressed by the first colonists of the ancient people when they recalled to remembrance the happy territory of their nativity and painted it in glowing colors to their children. Sylvian Bailey. If you guys hear a noise in my background, it is my dryer doing its best, okay? It's doing its best. Okay, glad we had that. Glad we had the conversation, okay? This is a really good quote in the beginning. So I'm gonna actually read it again, but I'm glad you think my username is cute. I'm Lightbulb Subliminals because my name is Moth, so Moth Lightbulbs, get it? It's cheesy, no, dude, I love that, okay? Like, I'm obsessed with that. Do you actually make subliminals? I'm gonna check out your channel if you do. I have my plushies. I'm ready for my bedtime story. Okay, then I must continue. All right, so I'm gonna read the quote again. It says, The tradition of the Golden Age arose from the natural regrets expressed by the first colonists of the ancient people when they recalled to remembrance the happy territory of their nativity and painted it in the glowing colors to their children. Sylvian Bailey. If you are unfamiliar what this is a quote about, it is essentially the colonizers, once they were finished colonizing and had their children in new lands, they were kind of faced to reckon with the fact that they lost their cultures along the way and the connection to their native lands, the native heritage that they had, perhaps had for how many generations and their families. And when they would tell the stories to their children, they would paint it in glowing colors, meaning they would embellish it in myth and legend and magic, if that makes sense. So that's why it's a little interesting. Yeah, I actually make subs, or I try to. I have bad motivation subs. No, it's okay, light bulbs. You can do it. I believe in you. So I'm definitely gonna go subscribe. I would right now, but since I'm live, I can't, or the live will end. But I know where to find you, okay? I do. So the ages of man. According to the Hellenic Greeks, there had been 5 ages of man, of which all but the last, the Hellenic Doric Iron Age, had been matriarchal. The Iron Age was characterized by Hesiod, or lived in it as the unworthy successor of the earlier ages. Degenerate, cruel, unjust, libidinous, unfilial, treacherous were some of the adjectives applied to his own time by Hesiod, I think, the poet. He has been called the first nostalgic reactionary in Western civilization, unquote, for he bewildered the new ethic of male supremacy and denounced the triumph of patriarchy as a triumph of shameless robbery, force, and strife, much as Gibbon and others were to bewail the triumph of Christianity over the gracious gods and goddesses of Greece. Ooh, it's getting spicy. Merry meet paranormal endeavors, and welcome to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. Dragon Blinchy, welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. I had a feeling they would be alive today. You are insane, because I have been battling with the debate of going live all day today, okay? Because I cannot stop thinking about this book, and reading this book in my last live was scandalous, apparently. So we are going to continue. It's a book. I don't know what I'm about to say, so it's a book. I'm like literally reading aloud. It says the first age, the Golden Age, had been the time of paradise on earth, when, quote, there were no gods, unquote, or kings, and, quote, men lived without labor, never growing old, laughing much, and to whom death was no more terrible than sleep, unquote. This was the time of the great lost civilization, which had become, in the memory of man, only idealized, remote, and unrecapturable dream of childhood. Man's, quote, first fine careless rapture, unquote, when the immortals walked this earth as human men and women. Interesting. Raven Blackwood, welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. Hi, is there a Dragon Feather? Well, hey, hi, hello. How are you doing? How are you doing? It says the second age, the Silver Age, was the time of the powerful gynocracies that distinguished and revied civilization after the passing of lost civilization. This age lasted many thousands of years, ending only in historical times. It was the time of the flourishing of the great civilizations of Sumer, Egypt, and Crete, and is the stage of civilization to which poets refer to as the Golden Age. In the Silver Age, quote, men were utterly subject to their mothers and dared not disobey them even though they lived to be 100 years old, unquote. They never made sacrifices, never made war, and never learned to hunt and kill. Eric Froman attributes the sense of bliss that pervaded this age to the belief in the great goddess, the mother goddess, who loved all her children equally, in contrast to the later father god whose love was conditioned upon blind obedience, conformity, and strict compliance with the paternal dictations. Decadence, conformity, strife, and compliance with paternal dicta. I'm not sure what that word means. It's new, but it's probably the root word of like a dictator or something like that, or dictation or something like that. So let's see. Quote, the myth of the Golden Age, unquote, writes Graves, quote, derives from a tradition of tribal subservience to the ... goddess, you guessed it. The myth of the Silver Age also records matriarchal conditions, such as those surviving into recent times among the Picts, P-I-C-T-S, Picts of Scotland, I'm not sure, unquote. And according to Terence Powell, the Celt authority, the Picts were pure Celts. Am I saying that correctly? I'm not familiar with this. I've been Wiccan for years, but haven't practiced in a long time, so I went to the beginning and I'm learning everything paranormal. That is a very wise decision. May you enjoy the story time in your journey along the way. It says the Third Age, following the Silver Age, was the early Bronze Age, a time when Crete still reigned supreme in the Aegean and throughout the known world. That might be one of the racist words. I'm not too familiar. They all sound very familiar to me. So, just like when you read books like this, like you have to read them like with such like a grain of salt, right? Like this is just like something that I don't necessarily know everything that I'm reading. So that's why I'm also reading it like live with you guys, because my Dragon Guardians told me they wanted me to read this with you guys live to show you how when I get literature and I study it, like how I kind of break that down, and like sometimes reading it out loud actually really helps. So I definitely recommend trying that sometime. If you have like, even like if you're trying to read the Bible or something, sometimes it actually helps to like read it aloud. I know that's kind of strange. I digress. It says, let's see, it says, it was the time also known when the first Greeks wandered across the sea into the Peloponnese from Anatolia around 3000 BC and adopted the Cretan cult of the great goddess Potnia, whom they obviously identified with their own ancient Anatolian deity. These were the Archaeans, who about 1500 years after their arrival in Greece absorbed the Cretan culture and established the great Minoan-Mycenaean civilization on the mainland. It was during this age that men first learned to eat the flesh of animals. The later Bronze Age, the fourth age of man, was the heroic age of the Greeks. Its people were Homer's Archaeans, the Mycenaean heroes of Troy. Its last great king was Agamemnon, I think, and its great city was Mycenae. The fifth and last race were the Dorians of the Iron Age, who swept down from Europe through Thrace around 1000 BC, 200 years after the Trojan War, destroyed by Minoan-Mycenaean civilization and brought the Dark Ages to Greece. They, like the Achaeans and the Mycenaeans, were Indo-Europeans, but unlike these earlier Greeks, they brought with them their own new god, a male god, Zeus. It was they who abolished goddess worship and set up shrines to Zeus and his family throughout Greece. It was in Thrace, that land of mystery, that Zeus and the Dorians fought their first battles against the goddess, a fact which is memorialized in myth. Womp, womp, in the chat, womp, womp, where you at, womp, womp, in the chat, yeah, womp, womp, where you at? We are reading a very offensive book. Can I have womp womps for people who get mad at this book, Toga? Womp, womp. Zeus has always given me toxic masculinity vibes. That's really funny, Nightmare. I wish I knew how to pin comments. I wish I knew how to pin comments. Womp, womp, womp. Thank you, Toga. You are boss. Okay. Let's see. During and after the invasion of the Dorians and the descent of Greece into temporary barbarianism, the Silver Age was looked back upon with deep nostalgia at the time of peace and progress. To the non-Greeks, this era became the Golden Age, and even Hesiod was to designate it as such, for this age had been one of worldwide advancement, and its passing was mourned for centuries to come by poets of many nations. Poets of many nations, Jupiter Haven, welcome to your daily dose of dragon feather. Yeah. We're reading a very offensive book. Are you offended? I'm not. The Golden Age. Contrary to popular belief, impression that our earlier ancestors lived on warfare and violence, all the evidence, historical as well as archaeological, points to the fact that man was pacific and warfare unknown before the patriarchal revolution. I really hope, Toga, that Lucifer's in this book. That would be really cool, because there's a lot of like gods and goddesses, and we're about to get into a lot of Jewish history. We're about to get into a lot of Jewish history, Christian history, and I think we're gonna touch upon a little bit of Islamic stuff as well. But I only skimmed the chapters we're gonna cover today, just so I had a little bit of an idea of what we're gonna cover. But I'm pretty excited. I have elemental altars in each corner of my room. I have Greek god statues for each one. I have Zeus on my air altar, but he gives me bad vibes, so I might remove a nightmare. That's so awkward. But hey, more power to you, honestly. Like, I'm not too familiar with that pantheon, but I can see why Zeus would be a good god for like that would resonate with that element. But I work with Hecate and I see her as the great goddess. I've been Wiccan for 7 years. Raven Blackwood, if you stick around until we get to chapter 6 today, it actually talks about how the original god went by many names as the goddess, one being Hecate. So it's gonna be really excited. That's one of the things I saw when I skimmed this, but I didn't do a deep dive. I just had to know just kind of how much I was gonna have to read, because it's just like kind of good to be like, to be able to prepare a little bit. But it says, let's see. I think I'm just going to read what I said again because it was pretty poignant, okay? It says, contrary to the popular impression that our early ancestors lived on warfare and violence, all evidence, historical as well as archaeological, points to the fact that man was pacific and warfare unknown before the patriarchal revolution. The classical age was aware of this truth, even though the Greeks and Romans knew less about their own past than we do today. Their gynocratic past, quote, had been buried and forgotten, unquote. And Jane Harrison about the Athenians and the Catos at the time, the Romans had forgotten that their mothers, not long before, had sat in the Roman Senate. Ooh, that's bars, my friends. Yet the Roman poets, like the poets of Greece, knew intuitively that there had been a time in the not-so-distant past, before birth of the gods, when earth had been a semi-paradise of peace and tranquility, presided over by an omnipotent goddess. In the Eclogues, Virgil prays to return. I'm going to try that again. It says, in the Eclogues, Virgil prays for the return of the Golden Age, when, quote, justice, or parentheses, Themis, will reign again, and free the earth from never-ceasing fear, unquote. And Lucretius recalls the vanished time when, quote, terror and darkness were dispelled, unquote, by the goddess, quote, mother of gods, sole mistress of all things, without whom nothing can be glad or lovely, unquote. Interesting. He's fall because he did something Adam couldn't do, and then he helped Eve just because evil star happening. Lucifer didn't deserve any of this. Yeah, Toga, I'm gonna say I resonate with that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna back that one up from my perspective. Anyway, let's see what this says. Where am I? It says that these atavistic dreams of the poets were not myths is proven by the research of modern scholarship. Anthropologists, historians, and archaeologists now acknowledge the fact that, quote, the first stages of mankind were peaceful and constructive, unquote, and ask why, quote, barbarism succeeded the absolute peace of primitive mankind, unquote. James Breasted emphasizes the pacific habits of the early Egyptians. They were, quote, totally unwarlike, unquote. He writes, until they were taught violence by the invading nomadic Hyksos in the 17th century, said Sir Arthur Evans vouches equally for the peaceableness of the ancient Cretans. Quote, the Minoans lived a comfortable life in peaceful conditions, unquote, he writes. Quote, "We have found nothing that suggests war, nothing to imply civil strife, or even defense against foreign raids," unquote. And this condition lasted until the destruction of Knossos, Knossos, by the great earthquake and fire of the 15th century. Sir Leonard Woolley, in excavating the pre-deluge city of Ur, found evidence of a, quote, "civilization of an astonishingly high order," unquote. And Cottrell adds, quote, "We know from other excavations from Persia to the shores of the Mediterranean that these antediluvian peoples were considerably advanced," unquote, and considerably unwarlike. Quote, "Curiously enough, there were never any weapons," writes Woolley of Alakala. I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with that. It's Alalakh. And no evidence of human strife or violence has been found in any of the ancient cities of the Near East until late in the 3rd millennium, when the patriarchal nomads first invaded the, quote, "sown lands of the Fertile Crescent," unquote. Wow. So basically that says that humans' natural I just got a glimpse of something on the other page. It's about to rock your world, but basically what I just read kind of confirmed to me that, like, humans' nature isn't violence. Like, we created violence. Like, you're not born violent, like you're taught violence. Like, you're not born hateful or evil, like you're taught those things. Like, you're conditioned to be that way. Which is why I think it's a very controversial opinion these days, but, like, I don't believe, the only time I feel like killing is, like, justifiable is in self-defense. Otherwise, I feel like people should be rehabilitated, and if, like, rehabilitation doesn't work out, I don't know, like, it's just complicated. It's a more complex discussion than a simple conclusion. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's an ongoing improvement of how we just rehabilitate society to where we don't need things like rehabilitation. Does that make sense? You know, like, rehabilitation only exists today in the way that it does because we fucked everything up. Just some food for thought. Hey, Dragon Lady. Hey, Adam. Welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. Good to have you here. We are, again, continuing the very offensive, the very feminist, the very controversial book, The First Sex. It's really good. But anyway, it says, the prehistoric occupants of Britain say Missingham had no frontiers, no fortress, no weapons, and no warrior class, for they needed none. And August Theobald, who firmly believed that nothing good could come from quote-unquote paganism, reluctantly admits that the prehistoric, pre-Christian Irish had reached a, quote, "very high degree of civilization," unquote, in which peace and tranquility seemed to prevail. Brother. My brother, sister. My brother, sister, brother, sister. My brother, sister, brother, sister, brother, sister. I'm gonna read that again. And August, who, funny, it's August and we're reading this, Theobald, who firmly believed that nothing could come from paganism, reluctantly admits that the prehistoric, pre-Christian Irish had reached a, quote, "very high degree of civilization," unquote, in which peace and tranquility seemed to prevail. Meow, 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 meow. I'm sorry. You have to understand something, guys. I am an Irish woman, okay? I am. Not fully, not like 100% Irish woman, okay? But I will say, my grandpa personally immigrated here to America to escape genocide from the potato famine, which was genocide, okay? But I must say that we need green after that, so for the Irish vibes for 2 seconds, okay? This is truly for the Irish vibes for 2 seconds, okay? You know, okay? For 2 seconds. And then we're gonna go back to blue because this is a dragon feather. Okay. It says, quote, of old throughout all countries, religion possessed certain things in common, which belonged to the creeds of all nations, and were evidently derived from the primitive tradition of mankind. Such were the belief of in a golden age, and in the fall from a happy beginning, unquote, wrote Theobald in 1878, and G. Elliott Smith, the anthropologist, wrote in 1924, before the more recent archaeological revelations, quote, the careful analysis of all the available evidence seems to point clearly to the conclusion that the world once really enjoyed some such golden age as Hesiod describes, unquote. More and more archaeology is proving that there was indeed a golden age, a gynocratic age that endured for untold millennia, up past the dawn of written history. The recent excavation at Mersin and Catalhoyuk in Anatolia would be sufficient to confirm the fact of its feministic character, if there were no other evidence. Man was pacific, deity was feminine, and woman was supreme. Peace and justice prevailed under an all-merciful goddess, and the long robes of her priestesses remain to this day the habit of the male priests who followed after her. I'm sorry, excuse me? Hold on, that was a lot to unpack. Hold on, that was crazy. Okay. Just need the blue again because I'm obsessed. Okay. Okay. Blue light be given the vibe, and blue light be back in. LOL, you so wacky in a good way. Thank you. It's honor to entertain. Let's see. We're gonna read that whole paragraph again. That was crazy. It says more and more. Archaeology is proving that there was indeed a golden age, a gynocratic age that endured for untold millennia, up past the dawn of written history. The recent excavation at Mersin and Catalhoyuk in Anatolia would be sufficient to confirm the fact of its feministic character if there were no other evidence. Man was pacific, deity was feminine, and woman was supreme. Peace and justice prevailed under an all-merciful goddess, and the long robes of her priestesses remain to this day the habit of the male priests who followed after. That would be some tea, brother. There are some people that are born naturally sadistic. Sometimes it is trauma-induced. But the reason why we're talking about this is because humans today, the humans we are today, have so many generations upon generations upon generations being in age after age after age, right? Like we are the descendants of the descendants of the descendants of like the Iron Age, of the descendants of like the Bronze Age, of the descendants of the Silver Age, of the descendants of the Golden Age, and so on. And so like what we're really seeing today playing out on the world stage is just a manifestation of just millennia of trauma, like generations and generations and generations, because science is proving to us today that generational trauma is real. Like it's in the DNA, it can be passed on. So when we were up really at the origins of who knows how humans came about, because I don't know, that's why we're reading, that's why I explore, that's why I'm constantly looking in different places of religion. That's why I'm constantly working with dragons, because half the time I don't really feel like I know who I am. Why? Because like where do I come from? Like human, like as a human, like what am I? I feel like an alien. Can we talk about it? Because I think I need therapy sometimes because of it. I just don't know what the hell is going on here. So I don't know. I don't really know, Dragon. I don't think you know. I don't think anyone in the chat knows, and I definitely don't think the people leading the government know, so maybe they do, actually. No, they don't. We're gonna keep reading, because I have no idea. No idea. Let's see. We are here. It says, monotheism, once thought to have been the invention of Moses or of Akhenaten, was worldwide in the prehistoric and early historical world. As E.O. James writes, quote, it seems that Evans was correct when he affirmed that it was a monotheism in which female form of divinity was supreme, unquote. The Almighty Yahweh, the God of Moses, and the later Hebrews, was originally a goddess. It's a book. I know I said it, but I'm reading. It's a book. Even the Almighty Yahweh, the God of Moses and the later Hebrews, was originally a goddess, Iahuanat, whose very name was stolen from that of the Sumerian goddess. Theodore Reik asks, whatever happened to the original goddess of the Jewish people? Then he answers his own question, quote, the Torah forms the base upon which Judaism rests. She is considered older than the world and is assigned the cosmic role in creation. Even in the diluted form, we recognize the primal female goddess, unquote. Author's italics, in parentheses. And Robert Aaron worries about the pre-Mosaic Jewish people. Whom did they worship before Jehovah, he asks. And then he comes to the Reikian conclusion, the Torah older than God. I think it's different than like, no, I mean, look at a baby. Like that a baby is pure innocence. We're born pure. Like you can't, and depending on how that baby is treated when it comes into this world is explicitly responsible for how it turns out. Which is why I think having children is very controversial. I'm loving this conversation about Lucifer because Toga, I'm loving the advocation. You know, I know it would be really rude of me to say womp womp, but I mean that's kind of the feeling, you know, the original source for father issues. Very very deeply sorry, Lucifer. I really do apologize. I really do. Being childless is the way. I agree. I agree. The evolution is actually a miracle that humans survived this long, honestly. Listen to the song God is a Girl by Grove Coverage. I actually heard a priest say that God has no gender. Yes, I like that perspective too. I think it's like no gender because like gender's like, why would you need gender if you're God? I don't know. I like the song God is a Woman by Rihanna. I thought God is a Woman was by Ariana. Yeah. That was funny. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna continue. It says, as any perspective reader of the Old Testament can realize, the Hebrew nation had a hard time suppressing goddess worship, representing, as it did, a deep nostalgia for the old days of peace and plenty. Raphael Patai points out 40 places in the Old Testament where goddess worship among the Hebrews is mentioned, even after all the patriarchal editing of later times. In the time of Jeroboam, the goddess shared the temple with Jehovah. And the reason Jezebel has such a bad reputation among Christians and Jewish people is that she was pro-goddess and anti-Jehovah and had converted King Ahab to her belief in the goddess. Starlings, it's okay. I definitely recommend coming back though and reading because this one is gonna be spicy. It's already so spicy. Are you guys ready for this? This one might be controversial, okay? So deeply ingrained was the goddess cult in Palestine. Bruh, we are already getting more Palestine references. Oh, dragon, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. The neurological issues that make you crazy are, or violent, I should say. That I am completely on board with, okay? Completely. But anyway, it says, let's see. It says, sorry, I lost my place. Okay, so it says, so deeply ingrained was ... the goddess cult in Palestine. Free Palestine, writes E.O. James, quote, that it survived all attempts at drastic reformation by the Yahwehists until the end of the monarchy, unquote. Whoa. That's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. It says, even after the exile, as Jeremiah laments, the people persisted in worshiping the Queen of Heaven, whom, quote, our fathers, our kings, and our princes, unquote, have always adored. Quote, for then we had plenty, and were well, and saw no evil, unquote. Whereas Jehovah had brought evil times, quote, and nothing but misfortune, unquote. Ooh, that is so very spicy. It's a book, okay? I don't know what to say. It's a book. It says the Hebrews, like peoples throughout the world, long remembered the golden age and its great goddess. For the age in discovery, the tradition was found to have survived among the primitives who had been cut off from the mainstream of civilization for thousands of years. Among the remnants of a forgotten influence retained among savage tribes that surprised and mystified our European explorers were the universal belief in a lost paradise similar to the Garden of Eden of Judeo-Christian myth, and the belief in the primacy of a great goddess who was creator of the world and mother of all the gods. Whoa. Whoa. Lilith was expelled from heaven only because she deserved to obey a man. She also was not originally from the Bible. That was fan fiction. Yes, Lilith is not from the Bible. Hi, sorry I'm late, Daniel. Welcome back to your daily dose of dragon feather. Hecate's mentioned is the queen of heaven. Of heaven. Ooh, that was really a tongue-tied message. But all I'm gonna say is that we are getting to some exciting places. It says the Blessed Lady, and we are getting into a little bit of like racist language, so I'm gonna do my best to kind of like live translate all of it, okay? The Blessed Lady. An original myth, as we have said, including the Judaic and therefore that of Judaism's elder child, Christianity, there is an original great goddess who creates the universe, the earth, and the heavens, and finally creates the gods of mankind. Eventually, she bears, parthenogenically, a son who later becomes her lover, then her consort, next her surrogate, and finally, in patriarchal exclusive reign. However, oh, hold on. I'm gonna try that again. I accidentally skipped a few lines. That was weird. It says, eventually she bears, parthenogenically, a son who later becomes her lover, then her consort, next her surrogate, and finally, in patriarchal ages, the usurper of her power. In the measureless eons of her exclusive reign, however, she inaugurates civilization in all its aspects. Under her rule, the earth enjoys... Ooh, hello. Hello. What's up? I'm sitting in front of the door. What's up?
You want to hang out?
I'm on live reading. Do you mind if I continue?
No.
Yeah, not right now, Bubba. Oh, he came to come see and hang out with me, but this is... Bless you, my darling. Anyway, it says, under her rule, the earth enjoys a long period of peaceful progress, during which time cities are built, law and justice instituted, crops are planted and harvested, cattle are domesticated for their milk and wool, fire is discovered and utilized, the wheel is invented, ships are first constructed, and the arts, from ceramics and weaving to painting and sculpture, are begun. Then suddenly all is ended. Paradise is lost. A dark age overtakes the world, a dark age brought on by cataclysm, accompanied by a patriarchal revolution. Nomads, barbaric and uncivilized, roving bands of ejected, womenless men, destroy, and civilized city-states. depose the queens, and attempt to rule their stead. The result is chaos. War and violence make their appearance. Justice and law fly out the window. Might replaces right. The great goddess is replaced by a stern and vengeful god. Man becomes carnivorous. Property rights become paramount over human rights. Women is degraded and exploited, and civilization starts on the downward path. It still pursues. Such is the theme of all myth, from the golden age of the Greeks and Romans to the Garden of Eden of the Jewish and Christian and happy hunting ground of the Native Americans, as the Avaiki of the Polynesians, all ending in a fall from paradise and an utter failure. Oswald Spellinger attributes the failure of modern civilization to a, quote, Faustian, quote unquote, unquality in modern man, as opposed to what he terms Apollonian quality in ancient man. His definition of Faustian man is analogous to our definition of patriarchal man, to whom, quote, conflict is the essence of existence, unquote. While his definition of Apollonian it's Apollonian man, okay. While his definition of Apollonian man accords with our view of ancient Gaelic men, whom, quote, all conflict was evil, unquote. So it's basically saying, like, just different words for, like, men who oppose violence and men who are violent, I guess. Refused to obey a man. Sorry, typo. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so here we go. It says, quote, the civilization of the classical world was built upon Apollonian view of life, and the modern world has been working out in all its institutions and implications of the Faustian view. So basically we're heading in a very patriarchal view, which, as you see clearly to this day. Hence the patriarchal or masculist disorder of society, which is what we have currently today, according to Elizabeth Gold David. It says, Edward Carpenter drew his distinction between ancient matriarchal Apollonian man and modern patriarchal Faustian man when he wrote, quote, her woman's powers are more coordinated, more in harmony with each other, where his man's are disjointed and in conflict. The point is that man, with his uncoordinated nature, has during these latter centuries dominated the other sex and made himself the ruler of society. So naturally, we have a society made after his pattern, advanced in mechanical invention, but all involved in whirling confusion and strife, which on its human side is an utter failure, unquote. Ooh. Dragon, it's a metaphor for a lot. The Adam and Eve story is a metaphor for just a lot. I surmised a modern Western goddess somewhat related to Brigid, Bridget, who is basically a scout bard, maybe a bit like Pandora too. Interesting, Brian. By the way, welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. Let's see. It says, where did I lose my spot? It says, Spellinger, Carpenter, and all the philosophers and poets since Hesiod who have mourned the decline of Western civilization are, like Gibbon, mourning the passing of the matriarchal age and deploring the quote-unquote force and strife that characterize our modern patriarchal society. What all these men really want is a return to the golden age of matriarchy and the restoration of the great goddess. See, this is where this, like, book gets really, like, feminist, and it's, like, writing, so please. We can all read this with skeptical lens together, okay? It says, quote, her cult meets certain vital needs of mankind at all times, unquote, writes James, and Graves adds, quote, there can be no escape from the present more than usually miserable state of the world until the repressed desire of the Western races, which is for some form of goddess worship, finds satisfaction at last, unquote. That's really, really sad. Bye, Toga. Sleep well, and I hope you enjoyed your bedtime story. So that's really interesting, you guys. That's really, really interesting. It says, In recent months, oh, well, this is not in recent months, this is in 1971 recent months. It says, a French artist and an American clergyman have written books in which they explain world history as the working out of a master plan by some space hierarchy to create a perfect race in our galaxy using Earth as a laboratory. That's crazy. That's crazy. I should actually... 1971. When did World War II happen? Was that 1950? Or was it 1960s? Was it right after World War II or right before World War II or like during World War II? I wonder, you guys, if we'll get a reference to Zionism in this book. It says, according to this hypothesis, several experimental races have been planted here only to be destroyed eventually as failures. Okay, that's racist. Yeah, nope, 1939. Thank you, Jupiter Haven. I appreciate you. So that means that like the Nazi ideology was still cooking really well in 1971. Okay. So we're getting into some very racist stuff, so please bear with me. Please know that this might be offensive. Okay, it says, among such failures were the pre-Adamic peoples who were wiped out before Eden and the race of Adam, Earthman, destroyed in the flood. The recreated post-Diluvian race was scheduled for destruction around the beginning of our era, and Jesus, a spaceman, was sent to warn the worthy of their impending doom. All evidence, writes Paul Misraki, points to the intended destruction of the human race around the middle of the 1st century AD, but then something happened to change the ordained plan. Earthman was reprieved at the last minute and given a second chance. What happened? According to Miss Riaki, the quote-unquote death of Mary happened. About year 50 CE, Mary was returned bodily to the super race from whom she had come, and at once began to plead for man's reprieve. At her request, the quote end was postponed and is still being postponed through Mary's continuing intercession, wherefore the appearances at Lourdes, Fatima, etc. That was giving hella Nazi vibes. After the war, the Vatican helped Nazis escape, and the Pope had been German since, except for the current Pope. Keep that in mind. Thank you, Nightmare Fuel Studios. Okay. Bible stories were more historical by the Sumerian, not meant to be moral tales. So the garden, I guess, was a lesson on how to grow food. Trans people always existed, but some never had the chance. Yes, you're right. They didn't have the chance to transition. Let's see. It says, this hypothesis accords well that with the many distinguished scientists, Agret, Shklovsky, Sagan, Freeman, J. Dyson, Thomas Gold, to name a few, that the main line of humanity was planted here at different intervals in the past by a colonizing race from some distant star. According to this theory, the planted race has been held back and degraded by interbreeding with the indigenous types and products of evolution via the apes, of whom Neanderthal man was one result. Okay, that is very racist literature, okay? So there is no alien planted superior race that has degraded having children with indigenous populations. That's how we get things like genocide on our plane and our world, okay? So we need to be extremely understanding of that. That is just really bad. That was just really bad. So anyway, continuing on. It says, Neanderthal man, the brutish caveman of popular fancy, did not die out, but was absorbed by the unevolved races, the planted colonists, of whom Cro-Magnon man was exponent. If one examines the remains of Neanderthal man and compares them with remains of Cro-Magnon man, one finds it hard to believe that they both have evolved along the same lines from the same ancestor. That is so offensive. Oh my god. Oh my god, that's in this book. Holy shit. Okay, so if you need some really like textbook racism, I got it for you today, okay? It says, Neanderthal man was short, squat, shaggy, small-brained, uncreative, more animal than man. Crow man and woman who appeared quote-unquote suddenly out of nowhere in southwestern Europe about 20,000 years ago was tall, erect, creative, and intelligent, more intelligent, judging by his brain pan than modern man. While Neanderthal man was chinless, browless, prognathous, and hairy, Cro-Magnon man was well-defined chin, a high forehead, a small jaw, and was almost devoid of body hair. We are getting into the deepest of the white girl racism. Are you guys ready? Because this is feminist. This is white feminist literature of 1971. Okay. Elizabeth Gold Davis. You had some good ideas and you had some really shitty ones. Okay, we're working on it. Where did he come from? How did he arrive so suddenly in southwestern Europe, Spain, and France without apparently having traversed Middle Europe? If he came from the East or Italy, if he came from Africa. The crossing from Africa by way of Gibraltar into Spain would have been impossible, as it remained for thousands of years, owing to the fatal whirlpools and hidden shoals, the Celia and Charybdis of the ancients. Some have guessed that he came from the west, from the Atlantic Ocean, and some have guessed that he came from the sky. Holy racist. Yeah, uncreative, dumb, useless. Yeah, honestly, it's because literature, you want to know why we have slavery today? You want to know why we need to free the Congo? It's because there's so many books like this that have been written that have constantly been dehumanizing them and justifying it. Why they are, like you said, Jupiter, uncreative, dumb, useless, and why they should be used as like brute. No, they're human fucking beings. Last time I checked my fucking watch, okay? And language like this is only reserved for the dumbass racists and colonizers who think they are so mighty to write as if it's fact. Okay. Miseraki's hypothesis, therefore, is merely a Christianized version of the colonization theory as opposed to the evolutionary theory of man's origin on Earth. Omitting Adam, Jesus, and Mary from Miseraki's account, we have left the lost civilization, the revival of civilization at Sumer, and the great goddess as guide and superior of the whole affair. Is Mary, then, merely a new manifestation of the goddess, who, according to the Enuma Elish, was, quote, creator of all and mother of mankind, unquote? I wonder if the author is still alive and if she still stands by everything in this book. Nightmare Fuel Studios, I'm going to definitely do a deep dive on Elizabeth after this video because these words, man, these words. Yeah, please still Google it because I'm not able to while I'm live. So there's that. It's quite uncomfortable to understand, but here we are doing our best. Okay, it says, for the fact that most frequent visitor to Earth, according to mystics and visionaries, both great and small, is a quote-unquote lady. Christians have always assumed her to be Mary, but non-Christians have given her different identities. Lucius called her the Queen of Heaven, and she called herself, when she appeared to him, quote, the mother of all things, master and governor of the universe, chief of the powers divine, queen of all that dwell in heaven and in hell. At my will the planets of the sky and the winds of the seas are disposed. My divinity is adored throughout the world by many names. For the Phrygians, it says Phryggians. All right, ready, guys? All your goddesses are about to get a call out. Ready? It says, call me mother of the gods. The Athenians, Athene. The Cyprians, Venus. The Cretans, Diana. The Sicilians, Persephone. The Eleusinians, their ancient goddess Charis. Some Juno, some Minerva, some Hera, others Bellona, others Hecate, others Ramanusia. But the Egyptians, which are excellent in all kinds of ancient knowledge, do call me by my true name, Queen Isis. And to further correlate this blessed lady with the Blessed Mary of Mirasaki, she adds, as an indication of her Mary-like intercessionary powers, quote, I alone may prolong thy days beyond the time of fates have ordained, unquote. This is so pretty. The identity of the virgin goddess Isis with the Christian virgin goddess Mary is pointed out by Carpenter. Quote, the Virgin Mary with the Holy Child in her arms can be traced by linear descent back to Egyptian Isis with the infant Horus, and thence to the constellation Virgo shining in the sky. I'm a Virgo rising. Why do I have this book? Why do I have this book? I'm crying. I'm sorry, I'm crying. I think that's beautiful literature. I think that's beautiful literature, you racist bitch. Okay. Okay. In the representations of the zodiac in the temple of Dendra in Egypt, the figure of Virgo is anointed by a smaller figure of Isis with Horus in her arms. And so the Roman Church fixed the celebration of Mary's Assumption into glory at the very date of said constellation's disappearance from sight in August, and her birth on the date of the same constellation's reappearance in September. I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please? The frequent appearances throughout history of a lovely lady in white and shining vestments, her fair hair garlanded with a crown of flowers, unquote, as Apuleius described her 2,000 years ago, and as the children of Fatima described her only 50 years ago, is most significant. Why is the Blessed One always a lady? Why never a gentleman? The explanation may lie, as Graves says, in Western man's repressed desire for a goddess, but it also may lie in the fact that the Blessed One, the ruler of the universe, is a woman, the great goddess of man's first million or more years. Yeah, goosebumps, Jupiter. You are right about that one. Zara, I remember this being a spell ritual in Scott Cunningham's Wiccan book. I am known by many names when channeling the moon energy. Dragon, goosebumps. You gave me goosebumps. I cried at the Wonder Woman movie when she, as a girl, raced against other Amazons who were near hero levels and nearly beat them. She had not made one small mistake. Had she not made one small mistake. Interesting, yeah. All right, let's see. How long is this next? Because it is so late and I'm like actually kind of not feeling the best. But I really wanted to read a couple more of these chapters. But I don't know if we'll be able to get through this entire chapter. But I just really feel like we need to read chapter 4. It says... Ooh, my makeup is like... It might like get in my eye. Hold on. I gotta be careful. Okay. It says... Archaeology Speaks, Chapter 4, Part 1. Tested by historically established truths, the mythical tradition is seen to be an authentic, independent record of the primordial age, a record in which invention plays no part. J.J. Bachofen. All right, ready? This is really good. This segment is called The Great Goddess. The power of the goddess is still strong. You right, Raven Blackwood. This one I'm dedicating to you, sweetheart. Okay. It says, the universal desire of mankind, quote, to depict her and worship her image is heralded the birth of art, unquote. And, quote, between 9,000 and 7,000 BC, art makes its appearance in the Near East in the form of statuettes of the supreme deity, the great goddess, unquote, says James Mellart. Her image carved on a bird's beak no larger than a man's fingernail or struck out on a megalith weighing hundreds of tons abound throughout the world. Archaeologists dig them up nearly every day, these effigies of the original deity of man. Wow. They are the earliest works of art ever discovered. One, the Venus of Wildermannsloch cave, dating back 70,000 years. The area of their finds stretches from Ireland to Siberia, through the Mediterranean area and Near East and Northern Africa. Earlier archaeologists, or antiquarians as they were called in the 19th century, brushed them off as fertility charms, but this explanation has been abandoned in the light of growing evidence that they represent man's first fumbling attempts to depict a godhead. An analogy may be drawn between the assumption that these figures were fertility charms and the possible assumption of some future civilization that our crucifixes were merely good luck charms. Quote, no one looking at these dainty little figures would form the impression that they were intended to induce fertility by magical means, unquote, writes our listener. Oh my gosh. It says, quote, that the worship of the goddess was an internal element of the megalithic culture of Europe, writes E.O. James. It's shown by the resurgence of its symbolism in the forms of statue menhirs and other designs in Brittany and Channel Isles and in Britain itself. The goddess was the dominant influence from India to the Mediterranean. The archaeological evidence has revealed the unique position occupied by the goddess. Throughout the ancient world, moreover, it is now becoming increasingly evident that she has a widespread influence and played a very significant role in the subsequent development of the ancient religions from India to Palestine. From Neolithic times to the Christian era, her cult was the most effective revival to Christianity. Authors, italics. Free, free, free Palestine. Yeah, free, free, free Palestine. I can't believe how much Palestine is referenced in this book. It blows me away. Since James wrote in 1957, revolutionary new evidence has been uncovered in Anatolia of the accuracy of his assumptions. The evidence for the gyarchic origins of our civilization and for the primary worship of a female deity is astonishing, as we see in all the following section. Also, however, other evidence is accumulated that not all the archaeological finds of female effigies were meant to represent the goddess. Among the goddess figures, there are portraits of living women. There is no appearance of stereotype, even in digs at the same location dating from the same period. The images vary from slim-hipped, small-boned lovelies to, I'm not gonna read what she says exactly in here, but to depictions of pregnancy, all breast, buttock, and belly. So just very racist literature is describing just a very curvy woman. It says in Egypt, it says the faces vary greatly from featureless blobs to expressions of delicate whimsiness and mystic wisdom, whatever that means. In Egypt, there is no question of their humanness found as they were among male effigies. Quote, the statuettes of Nagada, eye culture, 4th millennium BC, molded in clay or carved in bone, included the first human portraits in the round. What is remarkable is the predominance of female figures. Quote, Wolf Westendorf, quote, remarkable is the word invariably employed by archaeologists when they come upon evidence of the former dominance of women. Remarkable will be the reaction of archaeologists of the 18th century digging in the ruins of the lost civilization of the 20th, for any evidence that women even existed in the last few centuries of the Christian era will be utterly lacking. Future archaeologists will find that all our statues are of men. All our coin bear male likeness. The cornerstone and capstone of all our public buildings are carved with the names of men only, and all our archives preserved by chance in subterranean caves will deal solely with the deeds of men. Records of women's former existence will be at the scarce in archaeological finds of the future as are the records of men in the prehistoric archaeology of today. Eventually, one of our future archaeologists will come up with the astounding theory that Christian-era men were able to reproduce himself partheno- or anthroparthenogenically, and like the Amazons of old, in reverse murdered his female offspring and reared only the males. Interesting theory you got there. What a trip. What a trip. This is breaking me, man. Oh, babe, hi. Thank you. I'm wearing your shirt. I'm sorry you can't see your name. There we go. Now you can see it. This is a Dilce's merch. Thank you. It's very cozy. It says, let's see, the matriarchal theory. It is remarkable that many varied and highly expert author archaeologists in the series Ancient Peoples and Places express their wonder at the evidence they have found that women were only prominent in each other of their areas of research from the Near East to Ireland. East writes as if this ancient dominance of women were unique and peculiar to his archaeological province, yet taken altogether, these archaeological finds prove that feminine preeminence was a universal and not a localized phenomenon. Interesting. Interesting. What do you guys think? Brian, you are absolutely correct. The Venus figure goes back tens of thousands of years. Absolutely. Absolutely. Sophia! Welcome back to your daily dose of dragon feather, my girl. We are reading the spicy book again. Are you ready? Because most people aren't ready for this book, apparently. So we're going to go again. It says, let's see. It says, Beethoven recognized the truth of our gynecratic origins without benefit of the archaeological discoveries of modern times. He wrote in the 19th century, basing his conclusions only on the study of, quote, ancient authors, myth, surviving customs, place names, and language, unquote, that all the evidence joins to form a single picture and leads to the conclusion that matriarchy is not confined to any particular people, but marks a universal cultural stage. Preceding that of the patriarchal system, it was a cultural stage that was overlaid and totally destroyed by the later development of the ancient world, unquote. Crazy. I spoke with and saw Aset as far as I believe, and it was my first time, so I asked if it was Aset or Hecate I was speaking to, and they said it didn't matter, they are the same. Violet. That's crazy. That's insane. Okay, let me just digest that one for a second. Okay, that was fucking wild. I had to like really just like munch on that one. I had to go. So when I work with the goddess now, the way that my dragon guardians, especially Pickle Chips, has been informing me to work with goddesses is like different aspects of like the divine feminine. And I think that checks out. That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay, where am I, by the way? It says, Max Muller, before Beethoven, had sensed in the ancient myths a universality suggestive of a common origin in historical fact, but concluded that the key to their interpretation had been irrevocably lost. Myths were interpreted by the majority of the 19th century scholars, from Grimm to Bulfinch, as, quote, manifestations of natural phenomena, and the individuals of the stories as impersonifications of natural forces, unquote. And Sabine Baring-Gould remarks, this was the anthropomorphic theory of mythology in which, as Baring-Gould says, all heroes represent the sun and villains and demons of night and winter, all spears and arrows, the lightning, and all cows and sheep and dragons and swans and clouds. Excuse me, did we just get dragons by name in here? We just got dragons by name in this book. Do you see that? We got dragons on the page. Should I read this? I should read that sentence again. This was the anthropomorphic theory of mythology in which, as Baring-Gould says, quote, all heroes represent the sun, all villains the demons of night and winter, all spears and arrows the lightning, and all cows and sheep and dragons and swans, the clouds. Unquote. Bachofen insisted, and rightly as it turns out, that myths represent not fictions but historical realities. Quote, all the myths relating to matriarchy embody a memory of real events experienced by the human race. Unquote. It says, from general evidence from pre-civilizations, matriarchal women usually strategically directed men on hunts and strategy, and only an uppity man or tremendous status and smarts could influence their opinions. I think that is pretty on point to what this book is saying, but I don't know. I'm still learning about this stuff. So that means goddesses are all part of the same being and not individual entities, Azura. As far as I'm coming to understand it, I think so. It's breaking me down a little bit in my frontal lobe. But I think the only answer is to truly keep reading. Okay? Because I could argue the theory in this case that we're all connected, as within, so without, right? So in that situation, all the goddesses and gods are the same. Just some food for thought. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of like dissecting it live. Anyway, you have a good night. I have to get up at 5. It's when they're already there. Oh my gosh! Please get some sleep. But I hope you come back to enjoy some more goddess talk because of your connection to the goddess. But please get some sleep if you can. And thank you for joining your daily dose of dragon feather. Back to the book. It says literal dragons in here. That's insane. Bachofen insisted, and rightly as it turns out, oh, I already read that. Early Greek history was shrugged off as mythological fancy born in the fertile imaginations of Hesiod, Homer, and Herodotus. We know now that Homer, whom Alexander Pope called, quote, the most inventive of poets, unquote, invented nothing. Archaeology has shown that Homer in the Iliad was a reporter purely and simply, that Herodotus was amazingly accurate in his accounts of ancient peoples and their histories and cultures, and that Hesiod was more historian than mythologist. Quote, what Hesiod has to say of the first idealitic condition of mankind and its gradual deterioration is given not as an abstract exposition, but as a traditional account of what actually happened, in fact, as history, unquote, writes Aaron Rode. Madness. If they're all the same, that will destroy my reality. Yeah, if they're all the same, that will destroy my reality too. Okay, we're gonna keep going though, because my favorite thing in my life, Nightmare Fuel Studios, let me tell you something about my favorite thing in my life. Okay, let me tell you something. I love having my reality shattered. I know that might be a hot take, but I love having to literally rethink everything about my life as a lie. I like being challenged that way. And I think that's why the dragons gave me this book, Nightmare. Because not only did the dragons give me this book, the dragons gave us this book. We have gotten Tiamat. We have gotten Leviathan. I hope we get the Hydra if we haven't already. Did we get Ouroboros in here? We might have. Okay. We also have gotten Christianity. We've gotten Judaism. We've gotten Islam in here. We have gotten Hellenism. We've gotten Egyptian mythology. We've gotten... What's that? Oh, it's gonna kill me. There's so many in here. Druidism. Thank you. It's killing me. No, you were doing great, ADF. We only have primordial Jerkamo beings and supernovas. No fear. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. You guys are so silly. Okay. I'm kind of overwhelmed right now. Okay. The accumulating archaeological evidence of the matriarchal origins of human society calls for a drastic rewriting of the history of mankind on Earth. The original matriarchy is obvious, writes Graves. Despite the patriarchal interpretation of the Old and New Testaments, and James Hastings' Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics states that, quote, "It is certain that by far the most frequent process throughout the world has been the transition from mother right matriarchy to father right patriarchy." Interesting. Quote, "The violence of the antagonism against the theory of matriarchy arouses the suspicion that it is based on an emotional prejudice against that assumption so foreign to the thinking and feeling of our patriarchal culture," unquote, writes Eric Fromm. Norse and Celtic, yes, my friends. Yes, yes, yes. It says, "Yet the theory," quote, "has been irrefutably confirmed," unquote, says Campbell, "by the archaeological breakthroughs as the decipherment of the Cretan Linear B tablets, quote, a pre-Hellenic treasure trove," unquote, and by the recent excavations in Anatolia. Ooh. Now we're at the next chapter, which is called, or like section, it's called Katal Huyuk. In the few years since Campbell wrote those words in 1964, far more astonishing proof of Bakhofin's theory that come to light in Anatolia, particularly at Katal Huyuk, quote, the oldest town known in the history of civilization," unquote. Since 1950, archaeology has been busily at work in modern Turkey, uncovering incontrovertible facts that have caused historians to revise their entire concept of the remote past of human history. Interesting. Among these new facts is the unsuspected by some antiquity of the civilized human society, the society of the 9th millennium BC, more than 10,000 years ago, has now been found to have been more civilized than many subsequent society of historical times, contrary to the recently held belief that Anatolia had been bypassed by man until the Hittite emergence there in the 2nd millennium. Archaeology now reveals that the great Hittite civilization of historical times, quote, "was not a beginning but the end," author's italics, "of a long period of development. It was not brought," unquote. "There was but evolved there a genre, there but evolved there." Oh, okay, so it evolved there. Jean Macade writes, "The recent, quote, discovery of the Anatolian Neolithic has revolutionized the prehistoric of the Near East," unquote. Is that true? I'm not sure. "And of the world, it has knocked into a cocked hat the popular theory still accepted by laymen and still disseminated in the textbooks that our present civilization originated in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley of Iraq among a Semitic people." Okay, wait. It says, Christy! Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. Can you help me? This sounds so racist to me. Okay, it says, okay. It says, okay. Where I lost my spot. It says, what does it say? It says, "In recent, quote, discovery of the Anatolian Neolithic has revolutionized the prehistory of the Near East and of the world. It has knocked into a cocked hat that the popular theory, still accepted by laymen and still disseminated in the textbooks, that our present civilization originated in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley of Iraq among a Semitic people." Bruh. Archdragon, welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. I think that's a lot to unpack, but we're about to get into some more Palestine stuff because it literally says it on this book. Mashallah. I could literally cry. This book is crazy. Actually, I'm crying because this book is that crazy. Okay. Subscribe for more reading of this book. It says, I'm going to read that one last time because it's really that insane, okay? "The recent discovery of the Anatolian Neolithic has revolutionized the prehistory of the Near East and of the world. It has knocked into a cocked hat the popular theory, still accepted by laymen and still disseminated in the textbooks, that our present civilization originated in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley of Iraq. Among a Semitic people. For contrary to previous belief, Anatolia was, quote, not colonized by Semitic or Oriental peoples from Mesopotamia and Palestine, but was itself the source of these and other civilizations and was, quote, an important center in the diffusion of culture. Free, free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. This book is gold. Gold. If I was literally in a fire and I had to grab one book, this is the book I'm grabbing. I think the mostly Kyrgyzstan. Oh man, I'm fucking that up. Kyrgyzstan, fuck me. Tribe spelling in about 2000 BC decided to leave this popular civilization thing idea and head across the forming land bridge to the American continent. Interesting, Brian. I am gonna read this again because this is pretty interesting. For contrary to previous belief, Anatolia was not colonized by Semitic or Oriental peoples from Mesopotamia and Palestine, but was itself the source of these and other civilizations and was, quote, an important center in the diffusion of culture, unquote, in the Near East and Aegean. Its people have been found to have been primarily of Indo-European stock, and pottery found in northern Anatolia can be traced to European Thrace and the Danube region. Man, this paragraph, I literally could probably sit and try and dissect for hours. This one's really screwing with my head. I just hear dragons laughing at me, which is kind of freaking annoying, actually. But I think we might have to circle back to that one because that was a lot. There's a lot in here. There's also, what's it called? There's a lot of racist notes in here as well. I'm not going to cover that right now, but I might go over the racist notes in this book once we're done with reading the book, because I want the book to speak for itself. I don't want like a white man who was mad about the book to speak over it, because it was clearly a white man. Anyway, we're moving on. Since 1966, detailed reports have been made on 3 prehistoric towns in Anatolia: Mersin, Hakkiller, and Catalhuyuk. In all of them, the message is clear and unequivocal. Ancient society was gynocratic and its deity was feminine. At all 3 sites, quote, the cult of the goddess was predominant, unquote, says Al-Kim. And her predominance continued throughout the Neolithic and well into the Bronze Ages. For in the Bronze Age levels, and the main theme is still the great goddess. James Mellart, the archaeologist in charge of the first digs at Catalhuyuk, was overwhelmed by the implications of the earliest revelations there. That civilization was expressed at Catalhuyuk as woman-dominated, he writes, quote, is obvious. Mellart commenced his excavations at Catalhuyuk late in 1961, and the work still goes on. For the ancient city covers more than 32 acres of land and consists of at least 12 levels, city piled upon city dating back perhaps the year 10,000 BC. The earliest radiocarbon dating available gives a reading of 7,000 BC, 9,000 years ago, but internal evidence suggests that the city may have been over 1,000 years old even then, and the lowest levels had not been reached. Mellart's report writes, in 1966, before the completion of the excavation, shows that Catalhuyuk, whatever its name may have been 10,000 years ago, was not only a matriarchal but a utopian society. There had been no wars for 1,000 years. There was an ordered pattern of society. There were no human or animal sacrifices. Pets were kept and cherished. Vegetarianism prevailed, for domestic animals were kept for milk and wool, not for meat. There is no evidence of violent deaths. The women's were the heads of households, and they were reverently buried, while men's bones were thrown into charnel house. Above all, the supreme deity in all the temples was a goddess. I'm going to go out on a limb here to make an inference with this. I know that is a very interesting theory. I have no idea if this is real. I think I haven't said it in a minute, but I need to make it very clear that I'm just reading a book from like a scholarly perspective. Like, this is something I had to do in college, right? Like, I had to, like, you know, read a book and then like try and, you know, determine if like where the context was, the tone of the text, who the audience was. And my guardians tell me that they want me to do that with like things like the Bible, the Quran, this book, and other like, you know, like the Book of the Dead, or like other just like religious texts and spiritual texts, like in a scholarly way. That's like very much a thing. It says, strangely, a tribe isolated by glaciers in northern Japan and new look Caucasian and Javanese but have Curtis mitochondrial DNA. If you're not aware, Brian, Caucasian being associated with white people is actually because there was a colonizer who, and was it the land of Caucasus or was it an island? Forgive me, I don't remember if it was like on the mainland or an island, but there was basically a colonizer who found the people so beautiful there that they named the like white race after them. So that's weird. The more you know, the more you know, Caucasian people aren't white. They're people of color. Glad we had the conversation. Okay. It says, let's see. There is no evidence of violent deaths. Women were the heads of households, and they were reverently buried, while men's bones were thrown into charnel house. Above all, the supreme deity in all the temples was a goddess. Ooh, that's kind of spicy, isn't it? Each of these findings corroborates Bacoffin's idea of what early matriarchal societies were like. In his Mutterecht, I'm gonna spell it, it's Mutterrecht, published in 1861, over 100 years before the discovery of Catalhuyuk, he wrote, "An air of tender humanity permeated the culture of the matriarchal world, the primordial race of women which whom all peace vanished from the earth. Matriarchal states were framed for their freedom from strife and conflict. Matriarchal peoples assigned special culpability to the physical injury of any living creature or even animals. Yet Alkim wonders at the absence of defensive walls in the earlier levels of Hakelar and marvels at the apparent lack of violence towards wild animals depicted in the wall paintings of Catalhuyuk." Bacoffin's belief in the historicity of myth thus finds surprising confirmation, for in Catalhuyuk we have the confirmation of the myth of the Golden and Silver Ages, when men lived on the fruits of the ground, drinking the milk of goats, and were utterly subject to their mothers. In the golden age of Judeo-Christian myth, paradise was land, quote, flowing of milk and honey, unquote. Okay, this is about to get really good. I have a feeling. Okay. In the golden age of Judeo-Christian myth, paradise was a quote-unquote land flowing with milk and honey. And it may surprise the patriarchal Jewish people and Christians of today to learn that milk and honey both symbolize feminine rule. In masculine paradise, like that of Islam, wine is served. Milk symbolizes gynarchy for obvious reasons, and honey because the honeybee, quote, represents the feminine principle in nature. The life of the bee shows matriarchy in its clearest and purest form, unquote. And Aristotle considered bee society more advanced than that of man. I'm not too sure if it is all wine. I'm pretty sure in Islam all sorts of things are served. I think milk is served, I think honey is served, and wine is served, but wine doesn't get you drunk in Islam. I'm definitely gonna have to brush up on my knowledge of that, but just want to clarify. Good night, Azura. Thank you for the bedtime story. Of course, Daniel, and hope you enjoyed your daily dose of dragon feather. Okay, it says, let's see. Milk symbolizes gynarchy for obvious reasons, and honey because the honeybee represents the feminine principle in nature. The life of the bee shows matriarchy in its clearest and purest form, and Aristotle considered bee society more advanced than that of man. The Greek historians, contrary to historians of the Christian era, realized the important truths that tradition and myth were based on facts. As Am Hochart writes, and so in Greek thought and myths of the Golden and Silver Ages were accepted as reflections of an actual stage in human history, and now archaeology indicates that the Greeks were right. That's crazy. It's a sin to be drunk in Islam because people mess up the prayers, as far as my mom told me. That's what I thought too. So maybe homegirl has some Islamophobia too, because I wouldn't be surprised. Let's see. It says the Greek historians, contrary to the historians of the Christian era, realized the important truth of that tradition and myth were based on facts. As I already read that paragraph. Okay, probably of primary interest to the prehistorian, the tracer of lost peoples is the physical proof, touch and handle proof, to borrow Jane Harrison's phrase, at Catalhuyuk, of those close connections between Anatolians and the Cretans. We have long known that the bull was a gyarchic symbol and that the bull's horns were phallic symbols sacred to the goddess. Horned goddess? You know, I have a song where I reference being the horned goddess? Anyway, I'm gonna keep going. In the excavations of Crete some years ago, the sacredness of the bull was made plain, as was also the popularity of the national Cretan sport of bull leaping, a game in which the players might be injured but never the bull. Plato wrote in Creatus, the bull leaping was a sport popular in Atlantis, and since ancient Crete has been forgotten in classical Greece, with her ruins were unknown. Modern scholars have wondered where Plato derived the idea. We still do not know that, but we do know where the Cretans derived the idea of bull leaping, from no other people than the Anatolians of Catalhuyuk. We recognize, writes U. Badir Alkim of the University of Istanbul, the sport of bull leaping, one of the favorite themes of Cretan painting in wall paintings at Catalhuyuk 9,000 years ago. An important revelation at Catalhuyuk was the abundance of bull's horns found in the goddess shrines, and their resemblance to the horns of consecration of Crete and the later Aegean. Of equally great significance is the fact that Libris, the sacred double axe of Crete, symbol of the goddess and of matriarchal rule, is found painted in the temple walls of Catalhuyuk. The double axe, quote, the sign of imperial might, unquote, was the symbol of gyocratic power in Crete, as is among the Lycians, the Lycians, the Lydians, the Amazonians, the Amazons, the Etruscans, and even the Romans. It has been found in the graves of Paleolithic women of Europe buried 50,000 years ago, and it appears carved in the sacred stones of the pre-Celtic Stonehenge in England, facts which bespeak the close connection between early Stone Age Europe, the mysterious builders of Stone Age, and axe cultists of the prehistoric Aegean world and Anatolia. For as Bachofen could not have known, but as we know now, it is also the symbol of matriarchal power in Anatolian Catalhuyuk 10,000 years ago. Oh, wow. Oh, horns look like fallopian tubes. Just guessing. Brian. Yes, I love that observation. Gold star for you. Yeah, that's crazy, actually. Let's see. It says, the cult of the goddess and the worship of the bull, concludes Alkim, are features common to Catalhuyuk and Hakilar and Anatolia on the one hand, and to the Minoan religion on the other, which prove the existence of a bond between Anatolia and the Crete in prehistoric times. Another revelation in Anatolian archaeology is the proof offered in the subservience of man to women, as Millart expresses it. The inferior position of the male sex in ancient societies had long been postulated by scholars from Lewis Henry Morgan and Bachofen to Briffault and Graves, but proof, except in the later modified matriarchites of Crete and Neutria, had been lacking. Now we can see that in civilized societies of 4 to 10,000 years ago, man was indeed the quote-unquote second sex, and women was supreme. Of interest in the discoveries of Catalhuyuk is the evidence for vegetarianism, evidence which will force us to revise the old picture of the hunting caveman driving his kill home to his wife and children. For as we shall see, carnivorousness was a later developed wow, I can't read. For as we shall see, carnivorousness was a late development in human history, and hunting man came after agricultural man. Agricultural man. Do you mean the mother as in the Mother Earth? I mean mother as in the concept of a mother. Does that make sense? Like a woman who gives birth and creation, the creator of life, if you will. So let's see. It says, but of primary interest is the evidence disclosed at Catalhuyuk that funerary honors and reverent burial were reserved primarily for women. This phenomenon had been discovered earlier in Italian Umbria and had been thought a custom peculiar to the Etruscans of the millennium immediately preceding the Christian era. But Catalhuyuk reveals that the custom was by no means peculiar to any one people, any one place, or any one time. We will find that it prevailed throughout Europe and the Near East from an early age as 50,000 BC up into the early centuries of the present age. Wow, okay. So how many pages do we have left? We have only a couple pages left because my voice is kind of like dying on me a little bit. I really need to go eat some food. It's pretty late too. But here we have the next segment here called Even Tombs Have Tongues. This is going to be a good one, I'm feeling. The myth that patriarchal historians have delighted to perpetuate is that in ancient times, wives were oft interred with their husbands' bones, as were dogs and horses. But this equation of women with animals is exclusively Judeo-Christian concept and did not exist in the pre-Semitic Near East or in pre-Christian Europe. The wishful belief in the expendability of women was voiced as late as 1943 by an archaeologist who, in describing a tomb discovered at Mycenaean Dendra, reconstructs the burial as follows. Quote, then the king's servant, his dog, and possibly his wife, author's italics, are laid in their places covered with earth, and a large stone slab are placed over the filled pits, unquote. The author of this unwise deduction very wisely uses the precautionary, quote, possibly in connection with the martyred wife, for subsequent archaeological research has shown utter impossibility of any such wife sacrifice in Mycenaean or any other ancient Western civilization or pre-Semitic Eastern civilization. Is that an anti-Semitic statement? I'm not too sure, but I just wanted to add that note there. Let's see. The situation was far more likely to have been reversed. Men buried in women's tombs is as the case of the unknown Egyptian pharaoh buried at Saqqara, as well as of the Sumerian queen Shubad. Like the tombs discovered in Catalhuyuk, where buried skeletons were far more apt to be women's than men's, these 4th millennium tombs at Ur and Saqqara speak in loud accents of the ancient priority of women, and, like the above-mentioned tomb at Dendra, their significance was at first misinterpreted by the male-oriented archaeologists who discovered them. When the magnificent tomb of Shubad was discovered at Ur in the early 1920s, speculation was rife as to her identity. It was naturally assumed that she was the wife of some great king. But of what king? There was no king buried anywhere nearby. It was then conjectured that she was the sacred bride of a king or god, sacrificed in some prehistoric agricultural ceremony. In 1939, F. Bull offered the opinion that in a sacred marriage rite, the bride of the god may be killed, but the man who impersonates the god is not likely to be similarly treated. An error that more recent scholarship has rendered ridiculous. For in ancient religions, it was the young husband of the goddess queen who was ritually sacrificed, not the bride of the god king, since god kings were unheard of. The only male deity so far discovered in ancient times had been the small child occasionally depicted with the goddess, as in the wall paintings of Catalhuyuk. Moreover, Shubad was obviously no virginal bride. Her remains indicated that she was a woman of 40, mature and regal. She was obviously a queen in her own right, and the fact that her name does not appear on the pre-deluge Sumerian king lists indicates only that she, like so many other ancient queens, fell a victim to later editing by masculist historians. The unknown pharaoh buried at Saqqara about the same time that Shubad was interred at Ur II is omitted from history. Yet the splendor of her tomb leaves no doubt that she was once a mighty monarch. With her were found the bones of uncountable men, together with the tools of their trade who were sacrificed and buried with her, craftsmen who would serve the dead women in the afterlife. If the Christian soul winces at the evidence of human sacrifice, let it not be forgotten that early Christians and even Jesus himself sacrificed living animals, and the difference is one of degree and not of kind. That is some spicy language, my friends. Do you it says, is Mother Nature synonymous? Probably, I would say. Some ancient buried important female had a long, concealed, pointy hat on her head buried with her. Ooh, Brian, that's spicy. Let's keep going. I wonder if it'll mention it. It says, when the tombs of Italian Tuscany were unearthed in the 19th century, their implications were astonishing, for in every tomb the place of honor was reserved for the materfamilias, or the maternal family members, the woman head of the family. Or the woman head of the family. So invariable was the rule that Raniero Meganarelli, 19th century archaeologist, formulated a new law that Etruscan tombs, the body of the man on the left was disposed on a cline, a platform, that of the woman always on the right, in a sarcophagus. It seems, writes Jacques Haragon, that the purpose of this difference was to make sure that the certain category of the dead, the woman, would have more sacred character, and the sarcophagus functioned as a kind of reliquary protecting particularly precious, author's italics, remains. So this evidence reverence of woman in Etruria is echoed in the tombs found so recently at Catalhuyuk and far off Anatolia, where the privileged dead found the shrines were most, if not all, of the female sex. The other echo is heard even in farther off Wessex in 5th millennium, England, where, as JFS Stone writes, it would seem that the rite of disc barrow burial was reserved very largely for womenfolk, and again in Paleolithic Europe of 50,000 years ago, for Frederick Marie Bourguignon says that most of the graves that remote period contain only a single richly ornamented female skeleton. Reverence for women was indeed an ancient and long-enduring custom of the human race. Since 1943, archaeological evidence of this philosophy had popped up all over Europe. In Mycenaean Greece, the majority of the tombs unearthed in recent years have been found to be empty, devastated by grave robbers in antiquity. Predictably, it was assumed that the most magnificent of these rifled tombs were those of kings. Yet one of the few unmolested tombs so far revealed one of the great wealth of munification has proven to be that of a young girl, a small girl who was laid to rest in this deep grave with a good assortment of precious ornaments, reports G.E. Milonius. Around her skull was a diadem made of gold with beads of crystal of amethyst suspended from it. Wow, there's a amethyst reference in here. Lunar Rainbow, hello, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. We are almost done for today's Daily Dose, but we have a couple pages left. So it says, patriarchal myth has handed down the stirring tradition of prehistoric European burials in which the big chief is laid to rest with his faithful steed, his faithful retainers, and his numerous wives, all the latter buried alive as reconstructed by Alex Persson above. In the first place, our European ancestors, Celtic, Greek, or Roman, were all monogamous. In the second place, the great chief found in the typical Celtic grave is far more apt to be a woman than a man. In 1954, at Reinheim, near Saarbrücken, Germany, the grave of 4th century BC Celtic woman was unearthed. It was proclaimed the richest Celtic grave yet discovered, until a similar grave was found in France at Vix near Châtillon-sur-Seine. This too was the grave of a woman. In both graves, gold abounded in excess of any treasure yet found in Celtic warrior graves. Golden bracelets, flagons, cups, and torques had been buried with the body in each grave, and both graves had been lined with heavy oak, so thick that remnants of the planks still survive after 23 centuries under the ground. The oak lining is a feature that has not yet been found in any Celtic men's graves in Europe or in Britain. It was as if they had considered women to be of a superior essence, as Hurrigan says of the Etruscans. And the oaken lining served as a kind of reliquary protecting particularly precious remains. The most mystifying aspect of these and older Celtic women's graves is the presence in all of them of golden torques. The torque was peculiarly Celtic ornament, a yoke-like circular band opening at the front and was worn about the neck by Celtic men. It is present in paintings and sculptures of Gaelic and British warriors that survive from Roman times, outstandingly in the well-known statue of the Dying Gaul, and it is never seen on women. Yet, to quote T.G.F. Powell, the great Celt authority, it is interesting that the most splendid gold torques come from women's author italics tombs. There are examples from very few warrior graves. These latter are of bronze, not gold. Bronze torques are known from some few warrior graves, and yet for the living as opposed to the dead. The torque was essentially a male ornament. Why then do they appear most frequently in women's graves? And why gold in women's graves and bronze in men's? Interesting. Is this the same book? Yes, Nora Felis, it's the first sex. We're almost done with chapter 4. And it's really getting to my throat. I'm so sorry. I have so many amethysts that I'm taking it as a sign. Yeah, Jupiter, I have so much amethyst. It's actually insane. The fact that it's even in this book is crazy though. But here we go. It says, let's see. It says Powell's worries about this inconsistency too, and with typical male ratiocination offers a unattainable hypothesis. This is only put forward as a possible explanation for the absence of gold torques from men's graves, he hedges. But a man's torque might well have been inheritable as a symbol of the headship of the family or tribe, and thus presumably have been handed down from father to son. Brave try this as it is, it does not come close to explaining the prevalence of gold torques in women's graves, the occasional presence of bronze torques in men's graves, or what happened to the gold torques that were handed down from father to son. Gold torques do not simply evaporate, and they would be somewhere now if they had ever existed. That's a valid point. A far more plausible explanation is that the gold torques was a symbol of supreme authority, and that the bronze torques were something like brands worn by the warriors to signify their debt of service and fidelity to the owners of the gold torques, the women. It is significant that the gold torque averages 6 to 6.5 inches in diameter, while the bronze torque measures 8 to 8.5 inches. Since the large Celtic male would have been choked by a 6-inch torque, and since the women did not wear torques, it seems more than probable that the small gold torque was merely a symbol of authority, that was buried with its owner to indicate her status as head of the family or tribe. Powell's alternative hypothesis is that the torques in women's graves, quote, could have been head ornaments, unquote. But this idea is bashed by the finding with the gold torques of diadems, definitely head ornaments, as worn by the little Mycenaean girl and by the Celtic lady buried at Vix. No, the golden torques must have been a survival of the sacred objects connected with the ancient matriarchal society and civilization, like the lunar axe and the golden cup of Aegina, Argos, and Celtic Britain, all of which Herodotus noted were sacred relics among the Celts, golden relics which had fallen from the sky. Quote, golden relics which had fallen from the sky, unquote. The sky. There's a comic book hero named Amethyst with magical abilities and great willpower. Brian. There's nothing creative these days. They're all stolen from previous teachings, I'm pretty sure. From the Tigris in Asia to Portugal, writes Bergono of Paleolithic Europe and Asia Minor, the ritual representation of the goddess is to be found. In Champanog in France, she is shown carrying an axe 50,000 years ago. And in nearly all these ancient figures of the great goddess of 50 millennia ago, she who is the source of everything both good and harmful, at Bergamo describes her, is shown wearing a cylindrical necklace, author's italics. And that is a cylindrical necklace, if not, and what is a cylindrical necklace if not a torque? The bull's horns found in the goddess's shrines at Catalhuyuk are, as Alchem says, prototypes of the horns of consecration shown in the Cretan palaces of a much later period. And these Aegean horns of consecration, writes R.E.M. Wheeler, were no other than the golden torques of the later Celts of Europe. The golden yoke of Herodotus account the cylindrical necklace of Paleolithic Europe, the bull's horns of Neolithic Anatolia, and the horns of consecration of highly civilized Bronze Age Crete, and the Aegean and the golden torque of the Celtic Europe were all one and the same thing, the symbol of goddess worship, of matriarchal rule, and of female supremacy throughout the ancient world. Spicy. And that's the end of part 4. Chapter 4, part 1. Let's see. There's a lot. Chapter 5 is... Okay. I'm going to be so honest with you guys. Chapter 5 is really not that long. So I'm going to do my best to read it because I think it's a good one. But I think there might be some taboos. Literally, it's talking about taboos. So there might be some stuff I have to censor. So please bear with me. I highly recommend getting your own version of this book called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gold Davis. It's pretty fascinating. It's really fascinating. So read it. Okay, fine. It says it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 11 pages. That's really magical. So we're gonna finish it, no matter how long it takes us. But I think 3 chapters is a good chapter to finish on. So here we go. Chapter 5, part 1. Is this book even still in print? I actually have no idea, Nightmare Fuel Studios. But if it's not still in print, then that means it's in the public domain and there will be a PDF for you available online. So 5, Anthropology speaks. We discern in primitive customs the remains of an ancient and pure system, derived from wiser instructors, which has been corrupted by superstitious and degraded peoples. Sylvian Bailey. The First Family and the Origins of Taboo. This one might be hard for all of us. Oh, true. That's why I try to write comic books, but have no idea which story is going to go. Exactly. What genre would this book be in? I don't even know. It's just some old book. The title is like literally like rubbed off the book. Parts of the book seem to have potentially molded. Like, I don't know. This book is kind of a relic in its own right. I have no idea. I'm gonna have to do a deep dive after I finish this chapter and after I get off this live, just to kind of see like more about depth psychology. Maybe it might actually be philosophy, potentially. I would look in philosophy, I would look in historical, and I would look in potentially racist literature, if that can be considered a theme. Okay, so it says, the first family and the origins of taboo. Of supreme importance in the archaeological revelations of Anatolia has been the confirmation of the myth of female authority in the golden and silver ages of man. The proof that women domination was a fact not only of Paleolithic and Neolithic life, but it endured into the highly civilized Bronze Age of historical times. The popular concept of the primitive family group, complete with domineering father, cowed and submissive mother, and tumbling human cubs littering the cave home floor, has been completely discredited, yet it remains the image of caveman life as portrayed in widely disseminated media of comic strip and television serial today. Whew. When was it written? Brian. It was written in 1971. The fact is, or it was published in 1971, so that's what I should say. The fact is, the earliest human family consisted of a woman and her children. The patriarchal family was entirely unknown, writes Lewis Henry Morgan. It was not until after recorded civilization commenced that it became established. Fatherhood and the idea of permanent mating were very late comers in human history. So late, as a matter of fact, is the idea of paternity that the word for father does not even exist in the original Indo-European language, as the philologist Roland Kent points out. It's a book. It's a book. It's a book called The First Sex. It's a really compelling, very thought-provoking read. Very, very sassy. Very sassy. Okay. The Encyclopedia Britannica 1964 edition says that there were no word existed in the ancient Indo-European language for any concept or object. It may be accepted as a truism that that concept or object was unknown to the Indo-Europeans, and since this original language did not break up into the classical and modern languages that have descended from it, according to Kent, until about 3000 BC, it seems obvious that fatherhood was unknown even as recently as 5,000 years ago. She was on the brink of death as she was publishing this? If she was younger, she would have slayed more books. I know it. Dude, Jupiter Haven. This book, mashallah. I just lost my spot. That's really sad. I'm going to open right back up to it, though, because we weren't... Yeah, there we go. Okay. It says, even today, there are peoples who believe that sex and pregnancy are completely unrelated. Bronislaw Malikanowski describes tribes which believe that it helps to have the virgin's vagina opened by a man for the easier entrance into the womb of the future child's spirit. But the idea that the man has anything whatever to do with the making of a baby is beyond the comprehension of the natives. There was a lot to unpack in that fucking sentence. Are you kidding me? She died 3 years later. Are you? Yo, there's literally flies in my room. Do you know what that means? Flies equals spies. The conversation is spicy. She died 4 years after this book was published. So here's my bad. That's crazy. May she rest in paradise. It's just such a good read. Let's see. It says... In various islands of Oceania, where many traces of the original worldwide gynocracy survive, a man looks up on his own children as the children of his wife. Right. Whatever he does for the child is a payment, a mapula, for what their mother, his wife, has done for him. Unquote. Thus, in the native mind, the gratitude the husband feels for his wife, and not any idea, however slight or remote, of physical fatherhood, is the reason for a man's interest in his offspring. It must be clearly understood that psychological fatherhood does not exist in the mind of the natives. Okay, that's so racist. Please no. I don't know if she's in paradise with how racist she was. You know what? May God have mercy on her soul then, because you might be right about that. You might be so right about that. That's crazy. We're about to get into some more racist stuff, so hold your breath. It says, our earliest ancestors were no wiser. Man felt no obligation for the protection or support of his offspring, for the simple reason that he was unaware that he had any offspring. Children belonged to women, who alone were their creators and begetters. Thus the full responsibility for the children fell to the mother, as it still does among the higher mammals, as well as among some human groups, such as the, it says something much more offensive, but as the African Americans, as the Malaysians, and as the Micronesians? Okay. Those might be offensive terms too. The male, or I might just be ignorant. Either one. Insert either one of those. It says, the male of the species was a marauding beast, and woman was his sexual prey, as Briffault has expressed it. Women, in order to protect themselves and their children from these marauding beasts, soon banded together and formed the first communities, manless except for the young boys of the group. When the gens When the gens appeared, it united several sisters with their children and descendants in the female line, in perpetuity, in a tribe which became the unit of organization in the social system. The extended period of this stage of society, lasting thousands upon thousands of years, may be realized from the multiplicity of taboos that arose from it, and from the persistence in which these taboos have lasted, many into the modern life in America by way of Christian codes of conduct. The most persistent of these taboos is that of incest, a prohibition decreed by the earliest matriarch to protect herself and her daughters from the sexual abuse of her growing sons. We're about to get into some really controversial stuff. Okay. Oh, guess who's back? Back. Womp womp in the chat. Welcome back, Toga. We are about to get into some very controversial perspectives on incest. We know today, I'm going to let everybody know today that we have scientific precedent that incest is really bad, okay? Says she got a master's degree as a librarian at Kentucky University. Interesting, Brian. Keep letting me know about this author because it's really fascinating to me. It says, the crime of incest. Okay, incest is so unspeakable a crime among certain modern primitives that ridiculous extremes are adopted to prevent it. In Pacific Islands, brothers and sisters are separated from infancy on, and death will mysteriously fall on a boy who eats with his sisters or his mother. That this was a matriarchally ordained custom is proven by the fact that in Hawaii it was abolished in the 19th century by a queen, Kalahumunu, when she openly ate with her son in public, as Peter H. Buck, the Maori authority on the Polynesians, relates. Interesting. In Melanesia, there is a remarkable avoidance between a boy and his sister and his mother, beginning when he is first clothed. In New Caledonia, brothers and sisters must avoid each other throughout life, even to the extreme of going out of their way to avoid an accidental meeting. And in Polynesian Tonga, a man owes his first respect and allegiance to his sister, yet he may never enter her house. Very interesting. In Samoa and in Tonga, two social customs prevail, writes Buck. One is the brother-sister taboo, which includes cousins bearing the same relationship as brother and sister, i.e. maternal or cognic cousins. After 10 years of age, brothers and sisters were brought up in different houses and they ceased to play together. If one was in a house, the other may not enter. The other custom was the great respect paid by men to their sisters. In Tonga, the sister was regarded as superior in rank to the brother, and the superiority was shared by her children. In Samoa, and sisters' children were sacred. Author's italics. Do you think... is that true? See, some of the things that this book is saying, I'm not sure how valid they are, especially with how racist the tone is in terms of like referring to indigenous cultures, but I am going to keep going. So, compare this 20th century report on the Pacific Islanders to a 1st century report on the Celts of Europe. Sisters' children are held in great esteem by their uncles as well as by their fathers. Indeed, they regard the relation as even more sacred and binding. Author's italics. That this sister worship is a survival of the original universal civilization can hardly be doubted. It prevailed not only in the unspoiled Pacific in modern times, but among the Celts of Europe 2,000 years ago. The Celts, whom Tacitus miscalled Germans, seem to have retained the customs and traditions of the old civilization longer than any other civilized people in historical times. In Celion, a father is forbidden to see his daughter at all after she has arrived at puberty. For a nullable son, his mother. Among the Todas of India, a girl considers herself polluted if her clothing brushes that of a male relative, and a case is mentioned of a girl expressing horror when inadvertently touched by her father. Interesting. I don't know how valid that is. In Korea, boys were taught that it was unmanly to enter the room set apart for their sisters and their mother. In a pre-war Japan, the males and females of the family lived completely segregated lives, any chance of physical contact being considered dangerous in the extreme. These customs imply an aversion to incest that cannot be explained on biological grounds. Incest is quite common among animals, and there are no genetic arguments against it. We know today there are. Brother-sister matings and those between parents and offspring are common throughout the animal world without any apparent detriment to the species. I don't know how valid that is. Writes the zoologist Susan Michaelmore. Zoologist might be kind of scary word in and of itself. Thus, the church's ban on cousin marriages has no bias in genetics, as claimed by stems like Savage's fear of incest from the matriarchal discipline of male. Yes, we have basis in incest being bad for genetics. The mater familias, or matriarchal head of the household, once found it necessary to take stern measures to control the lust of her sons and for the protection of her daughters and herself, and so bred into her offsprings an ineradicable horror of incestual sexual relations. Interesting. Don't know about that. Very interesting, thought-provoking. As the boys of the maternal family group became older, numbers of them left home to join the marauding bands of adult males, but gradually more and more of the boys remained at home and became civilized. From these homestaying males of the maternal clans descended the people of the great gynocratic city-states that were the glory of the earliest historical societies. From the males who left the influence of the mother to become nomads and hunters, womanless except through seizure and rape, descended the barbaric hordes who upset civilization in the Near East when they overthrew the city-states in the 3rd millennium BC. As the nomadic Dorians were to destroy the Aegean civilization of the 1500 years later. Is that one of the racist words? Don't tell me this book is justifying incest. Oh, it is Nightmare Fuel Studios. This book is awesome. This book, like, literally everywhere you think it's going to go, it actually goes the opposite direction. There's some good truth, little sparkle nuggets in here, but, like, most of it is kind of just insane. So please know that I do not agree with all of this. I just think it's very good for us to read things that we don't necessarily agree with, because it's good for us to what? Challenge our brains, challenge things, and to remind ourselves, yeah, that's weird. Incest is weird, okay? And just because a book from 1971 is giving you an argument that it's good does not mean that it is, okay? Archaeology corroborates the evidence of anthropology here, for G. Ernest Wright says, Semitic groups living as nomads around the fringes of the Fertile Crescent moved into the sown lands of the matriarchal city-states as early as 2500 BC, and by 2300 BC, a dark age had descended upon the country, following the destruction of every major city-state center as far as these have been investigated. Unquote. That sounds spicy. The Sumerian city of Ur was one of these great city-states, and the Bible records the invasion of one such nomadic horde into its sown lands, where the tribe of Terah descended upon it. Sechem, Shechem, in Canaan, another of the great city-states, was later the victim of the Semitic tribe of the barbaric nomad Abraham, when he went forth into the land of Canaan onto the place of Shechem. So that is a different perspective of the prophet of Abraham. I'm pretty sure Abraham or Ibrahim is a prophet. This is giving it a very different perspective. Wow, that's crazy. Clearly the earth was quite a mess at the time. Yeah, Brian, you might be right about that. Let's see, it says, okay, it says the taboo of incest initiated to protect the women of the family group was eventually extended to include all women of the tribe, and the custom of marrying out was adopted. In the primitive world today, writes E.B. Taylor, there prevails widely the rule called exogamy, or marrying out, which forbids a man to marry a woman of his own matriarchal clan, an act which is considered criminal and may be punished with death among certain tribes of North America, Native Americans. The children take the clan name or totem of the mother, and if she were of the bear clan, her son would be a bear, and he might not marry a bear girl. In India, a Brahmin is not to marry a wife whose clan name is the same as his, nor may a Chinese take, that's so I don't know, or not may a Chinese take a wife of his own surname. Whew, the same restrictions were applied in the great and sophisticated Roman civilization, which allowed marriage between agnatic kin, those related on the father's side, but outlawed marriage between cognates relative on the mother's side. The custom survives among young people today in the play superstition that it is unlucky to marry a person whose surname is the same as one's own. There are some countries where some incestuous acts are not even seen as incest. Blows my mind. There's so much to unpack in this book. It's actually insane. All right, so that was just part one of this little chapter here. We're about halfway through this chapter. Wait, can you tell me your username? Is there a dragon feather? Anyway, it says, the sanctity of woman's blood, next to the incestual taboo, the most potent and lasting of gynarchic taboos is that connected with women's blood. The taboo, which remained in effect down through medieval times and accounts for the church's habit of burning women alive while merely beheading or quartering men, was imposed in the gynocratic age also to protect menstruating girls and to protect all women from the brutal rages of their male relatives. Are you telling me that the superstition of burning women at the stake comes from people burning women so men wouldn't do what with us and our dead bodies? Did I read that correctly? Did I read that correctly? Did I read that correctly? This taboo, which remained in effect down through medieval times and accounts for the church's habit of burning women alive while merely beheading or quartering men, was imposed in the gynocratic age also to protect menstruating girls and to protect all women from the brutal rages of their male relatives. I don't know about this one, guys. This one's a lot. Okay. The remnants of the belief in the powerful sanctity of women's blood are found today not only in the Christian rite of churching women after childbirth to destroy the dangerous power inherent in the placental blood, but also in the customs and taboo of less civilized peoples. It is almost universally believed among primitives, as among the early Hebrews, that for a man to touch a woman who is menstruating, who is pregnant, or who has recently delivered a child is dangerous for the man. If a woman have an issue of blood, whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean, wrote an author of Leviticus 3,000 years ago. Nature would appear to have taught the savages of Australia, that's racist by the way, writes Paulo Manteguisa, that which Moses, and inspired of God, imparted to the Hebrews for the conserving of their health. Manteguisa fell into the common error of interpreting these ancient taboos as safeguards for men, an explanation difficult to comprehend. For certainly intercourse during menstruation or pregnancy is fraught with more danger to the female than to the male. Yet the fallacy persists that feminine taboos were designed to protect men from the baneful influence of women. Ooh, that's kind of a spicy take. I like that take. Morgues don't hire men for a reason. Jupiter Haven, that's what I'm saying. You know what I mean. It says, in South Africa, for example, if a man touches his wife during her menstrual period, quote, his bones will become soft and she will lose his strength. Oh, and he will lose his strength, unquote. Even to occupy the same room with a menstruating woman is considered enervating, while the actual sight of a woman's blood may cause death. Oh, come on. A fan of West Africa, so weak that he could hardly move, was suspected to have become so seeing by the blood of a woman, unquote. And among the Dharmas of Southern Africa, quote, men may not see a lying-in woman, else they will become weak and will be killed in battle, unquote. One would never have done if he were to undertake to mention all of the peoples among whom the menstruating woman is looked upon as impure, or if he were to undertake to give the lengthy list of all the superstitions which still surround to our own day the act of menstruation, the menstrual blood, and everything that has to do with the mysterious genital function of women, writes Manteguisa. The universally believed fairy tales about the danger to men of menstruating women and pregnant women and women in childbed have the ring of tales told by old country nurses, tales of ogres and hobgoblins, to instill obedience through fear in their charges. And that is precisely what they were originally intended to do. They were tales told by the primordial matriarchs to scare little boys into obedience and respect for women. That so many anthropologists like Mantegazza concluded that these blood taboos were designed to protect the male is naive. Like the fear of incest, Why? Why does she want incest? These taboos are the end result of ancient teachings designed to protect women and girls. If later their meaning was distorted to imply a protection of men from women, it was because man's ego made a virtue of a necessity forced upon him by his mother in an age where he, quote, dared not disobey her, unquote. Interesting. Hold on. We only have a couple pages left, actually, so we're almost to the end here. It says, later, when women had organized society, so true civilization, these two taboos, and of course, taboo means sacred, the sacredness or taboo of female relations and of all women's blood became the tenets and very basis of the law. Matricide, the murder of the mother, involving the combination of these two most potent of taboos, was the most unspeakable of crimes, a crime for which there could be no explanation, no forgiveness, here or in the hereafter. Even in Epidus's time, patricide was no crime. Epidus's crime consisted not in killing his father, but in committing incest with his mother, a crime that not even his self-inflicted blindness, the exile, could wipe out. This myth is a purely matriarchal myth, and Erich Fromm goes so far in his matriarchal interpretation of it to postulate that Jocasta, not Oedipus, was the object of divine wrath, the wrath of the great goddess. It was Jocasta's sin, according to Fromm, the sin of allowing her child to be abandoned and exposed for the benefit of her husband, a justifiable expedient to the patriarchal mind, but the crime of crimes in the matriarchal view, that caused all the woes of the house of Laodice. It is significant that in the Oedipus myth, it is Oedipus's daughters, Antigone and Ismene, who are the strong and courageous characters, while the sons are depicted as weak and vacillating, disloyal, and self-seeking. Ooh, this is very spicy. The later legend of Orestes, who was pursued by the matriarchal Archaean Furies for killing his mother, and was later forgiven by the patriarchal Dorian gods because he had done it to avenge his father, symbolizes the very late transition from the mother worship to father honor, which took place after the Dorian invasion of Greece and the accompanying patriarchal revolution there. Very, very fascinating. Strength and sexual selection. I think this is the last segment. All right, this is the last segment in the chapter, and then we are done. But this is probably one of the best ones in the entire book. So ready? Mystical power and superior intelligence might account to some extent, but the awe and fear in which women were held by ancient men, but there must also have been some physical fear on the part of men to have held them in such abysmal subjugation for so many ages. All evidence of myth, tradition, and psychology, as well as that of anthropology, points to an original equality of the sexes in size and strength. Are you ready to really get into some spicy literature? Biologically speaking, as Michael Moore says, it is logical that the male should be the smaller partner. His only function is to provide spermatozoa, and those the human egg is only just visible to the human eye. The sperm is far, far smaller. The male, in the view of nature, is only a quote-unquote glorified gonad, in which size is irrelevant. The probability that women were once the physical equals of men is indicated by such myths as that of the Lemnian women, who easily vanquished their menfolk in a civil war in which all the males were slain, and in a similar legend of the women of Amathone, oh my gosh, who steadfastly refused to have intercourse with men, in the legends, probably historical, of the Amazons who lived manless, all but one night of the year, and destroyed even their own male babies, rearing only their daughters. Interesting. Good to know. Size doesn't matter. Oh, it's about to get more spicy. The myths of such women as Atalanta, who wrestled or raced all male challengers, and the worldwide myths of maidens who chose as suitors only those rare males who could best them in physical combat also more than hint at an original physical equality of the sexes. As late as the year AD 1908, the Atalanta myth survived in Siberia, where it was reported of the Koryak that the suitor who could not overtake his beloved in a foot race was rejected by her. In Malacca, Malaysia, in the 19th century, a similar test was in fashion. The bride would run away into the forest with the groom after her. If the latter was outrun and returned alone, he was met with the jeers of the wedding party, and the match was declared off. Ooh, spicy. Alien wrote the ancient sake, and the bridegroom had to do battle with his intended and subdue her before she would consent to be his wife. And modern writers have reported the custom of surviving in localities as far apart as the Arctic Circle in South Africa and Cape Colony. A Makuna suitor has to throw the girl in a wrestling match in order to secure her hand, and she will not consent to be his wife until he has thus proved himself. Among the Samoyeds of northern Russia, as in Kamchatka and Tenungus, marriage is not agreed to by the girl until the suitor has got the best of her by force. Interesting. Thus, the popular myth illustrated in modern comics of the caveman clubbing his chosen bride over the head and dragging her off by her hair is a very distorted depiction of a once universal custom, that of sexual selection by the women of a superior sire, a custom which prevailed when men and women were equal in size and strength. Ooh, okay. I don't know how I feel about this. This is a lot, right? There's a lot going on here, okay? And all I'm going to say is that take this with a grain of salt while we listen to this. This is a bedtime story. This is not reality, like factual reality 100%. Like, I'm not claiming that, nor am I stating that. We're just reading a good book, okay? These customs, says Kralke, contrary to modern masculist theory, have nothing to do with marriage by capture or with the subjugation of women. They are manifestations of the right of the woman to select her mate by combat, so to speak, the very form of sexual selection that led eventually to the muscular disparity between the sexes. For, as Lester Frank Ward says, if the male appears to excel in size and strength, it's because female preference has weeded out the little weak males in favor of superior sires. Interesting. She has sacrificed her original advantage for the good of the race. Ooh, I don't know about that. That's a weird sentence, my girl. Karen Horney, really that's her name. Karen Horney understands that the masculinity was, quote, an acquired sex difference, unquote, fostered by sexual selection on the part of the females. And the fact that modern men, on the whole, continue to be larger and stronger than women is an indication of the recency in this method of selection. Among the Celts of Europe, young men and women were still equal in size and strength as late as 1st century AD, as Tacitus says. The young men marry late, nor are the maidens hurried into marriage. The same age and a similar stature is required. Well matched and vigorous, they are wed. Author's italics. Edwards Carpenter sees a deterioration in the human race since the transference of selection privileges from female to the male. Shahida, I love your name, by the way. Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. You are a beautiful being, and so are you, my friend. You are beautiful too. Please enjoy this little bedtime story. It says, among most of the higher animals, and indeed among the earlier races of mankind, the males have been selected by the females on account of their prowess, superior strength, or beauty, and this led to the evolution of the race at large, of a type which was the ideal of the female. But when, in the later history of mankind, property love set in, this action ceased. Women then became property, and man began to select women for the characteristics that were pleasing to him, and consequently, the quality of the whole race began to be affected. With the return of women to freedom, the ideal of the female might again resume its sway and give to sexual selection a nobler influence than when exercised by males. The feminine influence might thus lead to the evolution of a more manly and dignified race than has been disclosed in the last days of patriarchal civilization. That is a word, my girl. That is a word. Mary Wollstonecraft observed 200 years ago that men were wont to marry the poorest specimens of womanhood and make them the mothers of the race. The quite recently Horney wrote, women presenting the specified traits that man's ideology has attributed to them, dependence, weakness, limited intelligence, are more frequently chosen by men. At the same time, women, says Carpenter, have been forced by social mores and by pecuniary necessity to accept many types of men that women really free would not countenance for their mates, for the fathers of their children. For the female sex, as Edmund Perrier writes, is the sex of psychological foresight. The female is the guardian of the hereditary qualities, while the voice of nature speaking to the male sex says to him, fecundate. It gives to the female different command and says to her, discriminate. Oh dear Lord. It says the modern trend in which later 20th century Aquarian boys are tending to select as mates strong, capable, and intelligent girls who can support them is probably a good omen for the future of the race. Also, it portends an eventual reversal of later-day sexual roles and a return to the original state of affairs, when man was secondary and women the backbone of home, family, and society. How she lost this position is a question that will concern us as we proceed. Such intense literature this is. Oh my goodness. She may, as the expression goes, have asked for it. Ooh, that's fucking... no. For when she bans of marauding males, eaters of roots and berries, rejects from the civilized communities, defied their apish heritage, and became hunters, a new dimension was added to sexuality. While the men who had chosen to remain at home with the women continued as plant growers and agriculturalists under the supervision of their mothers, the wild men, out of the desperation of hunger, became killers of flesh, which they devoured raw. The wild habits and raw meat diet of the undomesticated males no doubt led to their gradual sexual development and eventually to their conquest of the matriarchs. For Louis Berman points out that meat eaters have larger sexual organs than vegetarians. And this development may have proved irresistible to the women. She needed therapy, okay? She needed therapy. It is thus possible that the women of the old gynocracies brought on their own downfall by selecting the phallic wild men over the more civilized men of their own pacific and gentle world. What a way to end that chapter. That is all I have for you for today out of The First Sex, Elizabeth Gold Davis, to give you a little sneak peek. I'm a go on a carnivore diet now. I honestly have no idea how valid that is. I gotta look into that, but I will tell you guys that our next chapter is called Fetishes and Their Origin. So that's gonna be a really good one. We have a lot to talk about. I have a lot to discuss. We are, hold on, where did I end off? Here's how big the book is, right? The book is this big and we've only read this much of it, okay? We've read this much of it together. So that's how far we are in this book. It is extraordinarily exciting. I am not too sure what to expect every time I crack this one open, but this was crazy. My favorite part was the mythology of Isis with Horus being where Mary and Jesus come from. That's really interesting. Really liked that one. If you came in at a later time in the live, please go ahead and rewatch it. And if not, thank you so much for spending some of your day with me today. This book has been just such a wild ride and has just done a lot of things to me in my personal life that I will talk about one day. But yeah, reading this book is crazy. So I'm gonna keep doing it. We're gonna finish this together. This has kind of turned into my Bible. And the reason why I say that is because it is very racist, it's very misandrist, it's very interesting in the historical context. It talks a lot about all of the religions my dragon guardians tell me to look at. It references dragons, it references fairies, it references Celtic paganism, it references just like witchcraft being basically just wise women thinking. There's just so much that goes into this book. But it's also not all 100% true, and I don't want anyone to think that when you read books, especially books that were written a long time ago. Like this was written in 1971 and I'm currently reading this in 2024. So all I'm going to say before I hop off here is that when you read stuff like this that have very strong language, because there's a lot of like Nazi stuff in here as well, I really need you guys to understand that like you can't take these things as fact when you read them. You have to read things like this with an open mind and a critical lens and a skeptical heart, because you don't want to just accept everything you read as fact. It makes you very easily influenced and manipulated, and it kind of degrades your own personal opinion. So I just encourage you guys to read everything with a grain of salt and to follow your heart. And once you find something that resonates true with you, don't ever let anyone shake you on that, you know, unless your opinion is based in hurting other people or you being better than other people. That's fucking weird. But other than that, like if you're not bothering anyone or like forcing anyone to be a certain way or taking away anyone's right to be their way, just mind your own business and you're doing the best, you know what I mean? But until next time, stay geeky, cheeky, and freaky, little hatchlings. Blessed be and bye.